Cari Guitar-Nauti, bentornati a questo appuntamento con le interviste ai grandissimi chitarristi di livello mondiale. Quindi dopo aver intervistato Marty Friedman, Tommy Emmanuel, Steve Vai, interviste che vi invito a scoprire qua sul canale di YouTube, oggi andiamo a intervistare Paul Gilbert, altra leggenda vivente della chitarra. Potreste conoscerlo per i Mr.Big, che sono il suo progetto più famoso, ma in realtà la sua carriera è vastissima e si è anche evoluto molto, quindi è partito come shredder e poi dopo ha spaziato su altri generi musicali, più di recente anche sul blues, per esempio. Per me è una grandissima emozione perché soprattutto all'inizio ero veramente un super fan e la sua tecnica mi ha influenzato molto inizialmente, quindi è una grande emozione andare a conoscere uno dei miei idoli. Facciamolo insieme e gli chiediamo anche qualche consiglio, visto che lui è una leggenda proprio anche dal punto di vista tecnico, per migliorarci sulla chitarra. Cominciamo. So, hello Paul, how are you? Thanks for being here.
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for having me here. Recovering from my, I fell on the ice a couple weeks ago and broke my hip, and now I've got a new one. And that was pretty wild, but I'm feeling a lot stronger now, and I'm ready to get on the road in a couple months, and I'll be super strong then.
It's terrible. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was a surprise to me. And a little bit of ice. Definitely, the next time there's ice, I'm going to wear some kind of spikes on my shoes or something, or just not go outside.
Okay. So, Paul, you have a lot going on in terms of projects. So I'd start from your current projects. And in particular, you have this upcoming album, a tribute to Ronnie James Dio.
Yeah.
So my question is, where, yes, exactly. Where does it come from, the idea? Why the need to do that?
Well, it's kind of the best guitar lesson that I could ever give myself from the best guitar teacher in the world, Ronnie James Dio. And what I mean by that is my recent goal has been to become better and better at playing melodies. And the people who tend to be best at handling a melody are singers. And so actually, I made a list of singers that I was interested in learning their vocal lines and trying to get it on my guitar. Ronnie James Dio is the first name that I wrote down, and I've always loved the way he sings, and it's actually it's fairly friendly melodies for the guitar because the melodies are dramatic. He sings high, he sings low. There's a lot of movement, and that's much easier. That's going to work better on an instrument than if it's a melody that doesn't move very much. Like it would probably be really difficult to do like a Bob Dylan melody, where it's more like one note with a lot of style. It's actually, that might be a great exercise, but it's going to be hard, much more difficult. Where Ronnie was, you can a lot of movement, and it's really works nice on the guitar. So in a way, I chose a challenge that is challenging, but at the same time, I've got a pretty good chance of getting it right.
Yeah, it's great practice in terms of expressiveness. I mean, to reproducing the vocals in terms of the pitch, in terms of the dynamic. It's great practice, isn't it?
Well, it's so different because, of course, I come from a world of like practicing scales, and what I started to realize from listening and from teaching is that when a player practices a scale, there's one thing that changes, and that's the note. You go through a scale, the note keeps changing, but almost everything else is the same. Like the texture of the note, and the tone of the note, and how the length of the note, if it's there, and the how long it lasts, whether it's staccato or legato, so the beginning, the ending, it's all the sameness, and so you're almost trying to like cut little perfect robot notes out when you practice a scale. But when you hear a singer sing a melody, it's not that. It's full of contrasts. We have a staccato note, and then the next one's legato, and it's this constant contrast, and that's what brings the life and the emotion into it. And it requires a lot of technique to do it, but the techniques are so different than what you have if you're trying to make everything the same. So yeah, that's stuff that I've worked out from from teaching it a lot, and I've taught a lot of Dio, like the song "Long Live Rock and Roll." That melody in the verse, that's a great guitar lesson because it's just you can memorize it in a minute. It's simple to hear, but then you realize there's all these details about sliding in, sliding out. Where do you bend? It's a lot of detail in there.
Talking about sliding, you use the bottleneck a lot for this.
What I tend to do is the bottleneck slide. Like if you use it for the whole song, it starts to get kind of like bluesy, swampy, southern rock or blues, and I love that style, but I don't really want it for the whole song, especially if it's a metal song. So a lot of times what I do is I would just use that maybe in the bridge, and it would so give it a little bit of a different voice in one section to kind of set that section apart, but then go back to my fingers for the rest of the song, because somehow with the fingers I can get a little bit more bite, a little more attack. It's a little meaner, where the slide is a little more mellow somehow. But it's really nice to have that contrast, because it keeps again, any kind of contrast gives it life.
Yeah, it's cool. I read the track list. That's one of my favorite, like "Don't Talk to Strangers." So this powerful ballad, it's fantastic. I saw your clip where you play it and sing it. It's cool. What else?
I think that was probably slide at the beginning. And also the technique of playing slide is really helpful, just because you start to learn the fretboard horizontally. And even if you're not playing with the slide, you're just playing with your fingers, to be able to know where the scale notes are this way as opposed to up and down this way, because you can use your finger to slide. And that's the thing, like if you want to go from, let's say you have a D note and an E note, you want to somehow get from one to the other, there's so many ways to do it. You can just play the D and stop it, staccato, then play the E note, and so there's air, space in between, or you can play it legato with just one and then the other starts. But if you have any kind of bend or slide, you can bend it, you can slide it with your finger, you can slide it with a bottleneck, you can hammer it on. You could even slide from above, so there's so many ways to do it. And when you listen to singers, that's what makes them sound like a singer. They're always doing that kind of thing. And at first it's a little bit overwhelming because you got all these choices, but the more you do it, you start to get an instinct about what to do where, and so half of it's just ear training, just paying attention to what the singer's doing.
Yeah, you said you had a list of interesting singers. Can you mention somebody else alongside Dio?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think like Brad Delp from Boston. That whole Boston record is amazing. And a lot of times, like I'll tend to focus on the singers that sing really high, because it's so nice that because with my voice I can't hit those high notes, but with the guitar it's like, oh, I got all the high notes. So who's the guy from TNT? Tony Harnell from the TNT, like really high stuff, and you can play it. It works great. I would say, and also like the soulful singers, like Janis Joplin, or I already learned, like Mercedes-Benz was one of my best guitar lessons, was to learn her vocal line in Mercedes-Benz, or Grand Funk, Some Kind of Wonderful. That's a cover. They didn't write it, but the vocal in that was really helpful for me to learn.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so now it's in pre-order, the album. When is the release date?
Oh, the release date of the Dio album is April 7th.
Okay, cool. Okay, I'll take a note so the people watching can check it out. That's cool. But there's some other great news, because I saw the other day on your Instagram, if I remember correctly, there's a Mr. Big upcoming tour.
This is true, yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I'm glad it's in the summer, so I've got enough time for my hip to get better.
Yeah. You definitely have time to recover.
I'll be good and strong by then. But yeah, that's going to be really good. We got Nick DiVirgilio playing drums, and I jammed with him recently at Sweetwater, where he does a lot of the drum demos, and really had a great jam session with him. And I was telling Billy and Eric about him, and I said I think he's going to be, he's going to be great with us. And so what I did is I actually, one of our goals, we want to play the whole Lean Into It record.
Okay,
And
cool.
we've never done. I mean, of course, we played a lot of the songs, but we never played the entire thing. So I took some of the songs from Lean Into It and I replayed them. Just made my own Pro Tools session, click track, played the guitar, played the bass, and I sent that to Nick. And I said, Nick, overdub drums to this and sing the lead vocal. And he did. He made a video of himself, like, playing drums and singing like the lead. And then we sent that. He sent that to Billy and Eric, and they're like, "Oh my God, he's fantastic!"
Yeah, if you can do that, you're definitely the right person.
Yeah. And in a way, that's what Pat Torpey did. I mean, Pat, of course, when you think of Pat Torpey, you think drummer, but he was like doubling a lot of Eric's lead vocal lines, and such a strong part of our vocal harmonies. And we've
I
never
know because I saw you back in the day, so yeah, I know that pretty well.
And we've never been a band that uses background tracks. That would be I don't think we could, because it's just it would mess us up. So we really need somebody who can bring the right piece of the puzzle live. And I'm really happy we got Nick. He's going to be great.
So Paul, I have this question because I am a huge Mr.Big fan, but in the mid 90s, starting from the mid 90s, something happened because there was this huge wave started from bands like Nirvana, who kind of wiped out the whole scene, and it was kind of dramatic for musicians and fans of a certain kind of rock. So my question is, what was your perception at the time, and what is it now if you think back on that specific moment?
I think, the your place, like in the business, to me has always felt completely out of my control. So when things were really successful, of course, I'm happy about it, but I don't feel like I can take the credit. It's more like, well, because we make the music we make, and whatever comes back is that's somebody else's reaction. So through the ups and the downs, all I can do is what I can control. I can pick up my guitar and I can get try to get good sounds out, and so I guess as a so as a musician with a career, and you do what you can. You go, okay, well, we're not as popular here, so we'll go here, because in Japan and Southeast Asia we're still doing great. We did a lot of touring in Japan, in Indonesia, and those places, and so it wasn't. We had like a plan B. Thank goodness.
Okay. And this tour is starting from Asia, isn't it?
It starts there, and then that's in the summer. Then we're going to take a break and then come back and play as many other places as we can in 2024.
Yeah, I saw Europe. Do you think you'll be doing Italy too?
Well, I don't think we booked the shows yet, but of course, Italy's great. We love playing Italy, and we have some of our best shows there.
That's cool. So I have one last question about Mr.Big, and it's I have my own favorite Mr.Big songs. Do you have one in particular? Is a song with which you have a special bond for some reason?
I like to be with you a lot.
Okay.
A lot of the stuff from Lean Into It. I like Green Tin 60s Mine, Just Take My Heart. I tend to like the stuff that's got a lot of vocals. It was funny because when I joined the band, my vision was like, oh, Billy and I are gonna like do crazy stuff together, and that was like what got me excited. But as the band, as time went on, we started to do more and more vocal harmonies, and that really became like especially after To Be With You, we did a lot of like unplugged stuff. You know, unplugged, like I can't, you know, I can't do like that much guitar soloing. That's that's very satisfying because the acoustic is just too plinky. But um, but we could sing, and it still really had an impact, and it felt great. So it that's one of my favorite parts about Mr. Big is the songs with the harmonies.
Yeah. It's fantastic. Shall we talk about your playing for a second? Because I was reading yesterday your Wikipedia page, and it says you are a hard rock and heavy metal guitarist. So, I mean, your style and your music has changed a lot over time. So, my question is, do you still recognize yourself in that definition?
Well, it's funny, like the word heavy metal, what that means has changed. Like when I was a kid, Led Zeppelin was heavy metal. Now they're like classic blues or something. You know, so it. I think my biggest influences were when I was a kid. You know, from like you know the music that I heard that my parents had, and you know, and what I heard on the radio, and what my friends and the band members had. So a lot of what was going on between like 1964 with the start of the Beatles to about 1984 with the end of David Lee Roth Van Halen, you know, that was really the era where I soaked up the most musical influence, and when I learned to just get my hands working on the guitar. You know, after that, I explored more, and you know, I tended to go outside of metal for my exploration. You know, from exploring like the you know what do you call them the divas in the 90s. You know, I have demos where I'm singing Vanessa Williams songs and working out the synthesizer bass part on electric bass. And you know, I was making demos at home of Janet Jackson songs. You know, I liked the pop music in the 90s more than the rock a lot of times. And then as time went on, I got into jazz and blues and improvisation, and you know, and now I'm just really getting into what you know a lot of the singers that I grew up with, but you know, exploring how to get that on guitar. So you know, there's as far as hard rock and heavy metal. I mean, one thing I'll say about that is when I was doing the Dio record and I was playing the rhythm guitar parts, I enjoyed that so much. It was so much. I mean, the hair was standing up on my arms like every song. I'm going, man. You know, if I could grow my hair and have and join a band with a heavy metal singer, I could just sit here all day and play metal riffs. You know, I mean, that style. You know, I don't know. I've never somehow like the metal kind of after. I think accept and loudness were kind of as far as I got, and then when like all the kind of the thrashy stuff like Metallica, Megadeth, Pantera, somehow I was never really into that. I can see why people dig it because it's so intense, but like melodically, I always dug the kind of post 1980, or I mean pre 1985 metal or metal from the 70s was. It's just because how old I am.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the same exact page with you, so I stop pretty much there too.
And there were bands like I love King's X. I don't know if they're really metal either. I mean, in a way, they're kind of like loud gospel, you know. but you know, certainly there have been rock bands that I love the Wild Hearts from the '90s. I love Green Day. There's some great stuff.
Good. But you mentioned you mentioned blues, and I saw a post of yours recently. It was about like blues versus metal in terms of how articulate they are, and so there was a bit of backlash or debate in the comment section. So you confirm what you said that you think blues is more.
Well, I don't remember what I said, but I think like when I think of that, there's real like harmonic like differences in note choice, And in for soloing, like if you're a soloist and you're improvising, I think the typical heavy metal progression, you can sort of stick to one scale, and you're kind of safe. So you can go slow, you can go fast. If as long as you stick in that scale, you're all right. In the typical major blues progression, there's changes. It's almost like the first step into the jazz house. Like it's like, like because jazz can get pretty complicated, and blues like the first step there. And for me, coming from metal and coming from a place where I could safely just buzz through one scale and never have anything be wrong, and to suddenly try blues where I suddenly realized, man, I got to pay attention to what's going on, because this note that worked over the one chord, it's not sounding so good over the four. And so it was just in terms of getting chord changes together, that was a big challenge for me. And so that was it. It was just I felt like I had to be a little smarter or pay a little attention to one element. And I mean, harmony is not everything. There's so many other elements that make music work. But a lot of times that's like the part we like to think about. That's sort of like the intellectual part is like what notes go with scale, or how harmony works. And the typical blues harmony is to me was more demanding of me. I had to work harder to get it right. And so I think that's where it came from. Was like, man, this is more challenging than I thought. It's not. I don't just like take my pentatonic and slow it down. If I really want to follow it in almost like a jazz sense, it's demanding.
Yeah. Because most people think that blues is easier than heavy metal, where there are lots of virtuoso players. So that's an area where that happens. And a common stereotype is that playing the blues is quite easy. So yeah, what you're saying makes sense, but not everybody can understand it.
Well, the other thing I should say is that I remember having a conversation with Sean Lane, who is like one of the most technically advanced, amazing virtuoso musicians ever. And I think I said to him something like, "Oh, like the piano is easier than guitar," and because you just play one note. Even as a beginner, you can play one note. It sounds pretty good. Where guitar, you might have to practice for a long time to get one note to sound good. And he said, like his response to that was, he said, with any instrument, you can spend your whole life getting as deep into that instrument as you ever could. Like it's an endless art with any instrument, and I think that expands out to style. So, there's whether you can spend your whole you can be a genius and spend your whole life in metal and really create amazing art, and you can do that with blues. You can do that with jazz. So it's it's more like just how what do you love and how deep do you want to go?
Yeah,
and that's what's important.
Yeah, definitely. Paul, you mentioned the Beatles earlier, and there's a song of yours that I'm kind of obsessed with. It's "I Am Satan." I particularly love that song. But am I mad if I hear some of the Beatles especially in the final part?
Oh, in which part?
The final part, when it changes and goes crazy, reminds me of I guess.
Like at the end, the kind of like the "She's So Heavy" part.
Exactly. Oh, okay. You answered the question.
Actually, I don't remember the chords that was. It's been a long time since I listened to the song. I remember the beginning part, which was kind of Peter Frampton. Like it was kind of like what's the song? "Show Me the Way" by Peter Frampton. That was kind of similar to the main part of the song. But yeah, the end, I just remember it did something like dark, but I don't remember the chord.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like She's So Heavy.
So to me, like, I mean, the Beatles did so many different, they went in so many different directions. But if I had like one kind of takeaway thing that I think of as being Beatley. It's secondary dominant chords. And if you listen to 3 songs, you'll hear that they do the same chord move, like Sergeant Pepper, which goes like G7, A7, or is it yeah, and then C7. And those are all dominant chords, and it's not diatonic. It doesn't all fit in one key, but it sounds good. And so there's one example. And they use almost exactly the same thing in 8 Days a Week, which is like a D. I mean, they don't put quite as much emphasis on the 7th, but if the 7th was there, it would be a dominant 7th. So it's kind of inferred. You have a D, E, and then G. So it's really the same exact progression, but just different key. And the other one is You Won't See Me, which is again the same exact progression, but in the key of A. And especially when it hits that 2 chord, and it's a 7th or major, it's like that's not. It doesn't follow the diatonic rule. It bends the rules a little bit, and emotionally, that feeling is pretty rare in heavy metal. Like you don't hear that very often. But in Beatles stuff, you hear that all the time. And to me, it's that kind of feeling of like Austin Powers. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but it's sort of like the swinging '60s, like, hey baby, no, you're very naughty, and it's sort of mischievous and flirty, and it really takes me back to that time. And it's a songwriting technique that probably came from them listening to the like pop jazz stuff that their parents were doing.
Yeah,
and it was kind of lost. Like again, when you get into like Led Zeppelin, you won't hear much of that in Led Zeppelin because that's a little darker.
Yeah,
there's no mischief anymore. It's like we're serious now, no messing around. And so
yeah, they took themselves quite seriously. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. And then you get into like Pantera. It's like I can't. I mean, I'm not familiar with the catalog, but I would imagine like that's just like so far from like, hey baby, it's a very different mindset.
Yeah.
And so whenever I write or hear anything that's got that kind of chord, the secondary dominance, to me like that's one of the things I love about that era is the sort of swinging '60s. Beatles in 1965.
I can hear that in your music, definitely. Hearing that.
I can't help myself. That's probably what prevents me from really being a true like 100% metal person. Is my love of the mischievous secondary dominant chords.
It's cool. So Paul, you as well as a musician, you're an educator. And I mean, you started very young. So we talked about your evolution as a musician, but how has your teaching style changed over time, if it has?
Well, it's been influenced a lot by my students because at my online school, I can hear people play. They send in videos, and I watch them. And even when I first started the school, I knew I needed to make like a video course. So I went to GIT, the guitar school in LA, and I taught 100 private lessons in a row with 100 different people. And I just kind of wanted to take the temperature of what people were doing. And so a lot of what I teach is like a reaction to what I see. And it's very like if I couldn't hear anybody, what I would be teaching would be completely different because I'd be teaching what I'm into. But instead I sort of see like, oh, this is what people need. And I would say the biggest thing, and I have to be careful because I can kind of rant about this, and I'm curious. I wish I could like press fast forward and know what I would think about this in 5 or 10 years, because I suspect I might change from where I am now. But now it's a big deal about like wrist position, because I grew up listening to Jimmy Page and idolizing players that had their guitars really low, and with that kind of style, your thumb tends to creep over. Hendrix plays like that, Richie Blackmore, like all like the rock and blues players of the late 60s and the 70s were, I call it thumb over. And I've got big hands, so that to me, I can physically do that. And you know, I think like around the mid '80s, it seems like everybody started being thumb behind, and I don't know why, but
yeah, it's maybe classical guitar through in.
Yeah, and it's really not a right or a wrong. It's just a style difference. But the kind of grip that you can get on like string bending, especially like if you listen to Gary Moore or like even there's like the very slow controlled vibrato of somebody like Uli Roth or Yngwie, that's a very so much control and it's just beautiful. And that to me was always like the signature of the player. And then I mean it's so in a way it's kind of been my mission to get people like, come on, at least try it, because it's easier. It's easier to do that with the thumb over. But at the same time, I don't necessarily want everybody to sound like me. There's players that I love that don't play like that, and so I have to watch myself as a teacher and go like, okay, well, I want to give this person the information, say like, if you want to get this sound, it's easier to do it this way. Here's a bunch of phrases that'll help you try it, and then it's up to you to make the decision. Like, is that sound important to you? Because it doesn't have to be. There's not all music has to be exactly the same, but because that's where I come from, and that was always from the very beginning of my playing. That was always my main goal. Much more than playing fast. I just wanted to be able to play that note in Rock Steady by Bad Company, where rock steady, and then have that awesome note. So that it's hard for me to. I at least have to make sure I present that, and then I let the student run with it or not.
Okay, so you have students from over the world, being an online school.
Oh yeah, students definitely all over the world, and it's funny too, because once in a while, like I'll get like, especially with kids, like if you're a kid and you got small hands, it's physically impossible to do that. So there was one student, and I could tell like she's probably not gonna be able to do that, and she actually, I didn't even ask her to do this. She just did it on her own. She used the whammy bar for vibrato, almost like surf, like old, Ventures or that kind of thing. And she immediately sounded so good. I was like, oh, this is great. Like, just do that. Forget about the thumb over, play surf. It's killer. And, but the other thing I found about teaching, if I sort of give up on someone and they know it, then they tend to come back with a vengeance, which is wonderful. Like, and because I'll go like, okay, that thing we're trying to do, don't worry about that. That's we've got another way. And then she kept trying. She didn't give up, and then now she could do it. So it was wonderful to see. Even though I, as a teacher, kind of went like, well, maybe this thumb over thing isn't for you. We found another way to do it. She kept at it. And she got it, so that was wonderful.
That's so cool. So, Paul, as you're well aware, there are still lots of guitarists out there obsessed with technique. So I have this unique opportunity to learn something directly from you. And I don't know, do you have a couple of Paul Gilbert top tips to develop technique and speed for the young guys who want to do that out there?
Well, so much of it, because the guitar has 6 strings, so much of it is just about being able to control the noise. Because chances are, if you just move your hands really fast, you can play something that's fast. But the biggest challenge is the mess and the slop. So a lot of it is being able to mute with your hand to keep the low strings under control, to be able to. And again, the thumb over stuff's not just for vibrato; it also lets you use this part of your hand to mute strings, the fingertips to mute the adjacent strings. So a lot of times I would say, like, play just the low E string and just bang it and be really uncareful, like painting with a big brush, and then get your left hand to control the other 5 strings. So even though you're hitting all 6 strings, you only hear that one note coming through. And you have to do that until the hand position that you've got to do that becomes sort of a habit, and you just go there automatically. Then try it with the A string, see, because that's going to mean you have to get the thumb over. Just bang away at the A string. Like, don't be careful. Because I see guitar players are like, oh, so careful. You don't have to be. If you get the muting techniques together, you can actually be real loose and still be very clean. And so this is kind of global. It works for slow playing, it works for fast playing. But if you don't have that together and you try to play fast, it's just always going to be a battle of noise, or you got to be so careful that it's not fun anymore.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Would you like to say hi and say something to the guys watching before we go?
Well, hello, everybody watching. This is Paul Gilbert. Thanks for listening to me rant and my ideas. Come to my online school and I'll show you the details.
Definitely.
And I hope you like the Dio album, and I look forward to being on the road with Mr.Big, and hope to see you in the audience. And play what you want. You know, I hope you get some ideas from me, but in the end, you got to do what you hear. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Paul. It was a great pleasure. Bye.
Thank you.